I think a live stream is in order. That's what we're doing. Okay, I think, all right, my mic's going. Let's do this. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being here. So, this is the first live stream I've done since my son's passing. And what better topic to do that on than the American fentanyl crisis unleashed on purpose by Mexican drug cartels? Our fearless Attorney General, Merrick Garland, says. He comes right out and says, yeah, they're doing it on purpose. Well, you know what? I think they are. Because, China and take the chemicals from China and move them to Mexico and put them together there and then bring them up through the southern border. Pretty basic process, right? Pretty basic process. A process that ended up with my son being taken out. So, there's that. My son is now a statistic. And what we're seeing is you're starting to see a whole bunch of these storylines all kind of line up. How do I get my chat? How do I get my, sorry, folks, ready to display messages? Now, maybe just nobody's messaged yet. So you're starting to see a whole bunch of these storylines. We don't have the COVID deaths to rely on anymore. We can't talk about COVID, right? There's just not enough. There's just not enough data coming in. Not enough people are dying to be able to go, hey, look at COVID. Now you've got the numbers on fentanyl. And that's why I wanted to do this one, because there's been some things, and I'll talk about them during this live stream, where I'm personally going, are we trying to keep the numbers on this epidemic, fentanyl epidemic? Are we trying to keep the numbers on this down? Because it kind of feels like that. Just some of the things that have happened to me personally. And then I also had somebody that I know that's in addiction services, works in that industry. And we were kind of talking about this yesterday because I had a thing or two I wanted to ask him about my son's overdose. And, are there so many fentanyl deaths happening right now that, the powers that be, the authorities that be, number one, have to address it. And then number two, have to kind of cover up how many numbers are happening on a broad scale. And I don't know how they do that, but you know what I mean? And I'm not a huge conspiracy guy, but so much of this stuff, it kind of all comes at you at once. And you're like, hey, what's going on here? So some of the things that I wanted to point out is President Biden, our fearless leader of the free world, he spoke about it in the last State of the Union address, and we're gonna watch that. That was interesting. I found it kind of funny because you could hear the good guys in the background going, "It's your fault." You can't pin it entirely on Biden. I can't pin my son's death on Biden. I can't pin my son's death on the drug cartels. My son made choices, but what I do blame is you've got this access to these illegal street drugs that are just super cheap and they are super potent and people get hooked on them and they can't get off. And, we don't have the resources to deal with it. So this is going to be an epidemic to me that, you can't really create an antidote for it, right? You can't just all of a sudden put all these people in treatment because you don't have the resources to do that. So here we are. And we've got a congressional hearing and a Senate hearing. I think it was yesterday. We're going to watch. Let's just get into it. Let's just watch the video. This is kind of what this live stream is based on. American fentanyl crisis unleashed on purpose by Mexican drug cartels. Let's see what our esteemed Lindsey Graham from South Carolina and Merrick Garland have to say.
Gun and accident deaths combined in the United States. Did you know that?
Yes, sir.
I mean, how would you describe the fentanyl problem in America?
It's a horrible epidemic,
Okay.
But it's an epidemic that's been unleashed on purpose by the Sinaloa and the new generation Jalisco cartels.
Okay, let's just stop and absorb that for a moment. It's a horrible epidemic. It kills more people than car wrecks and gun violence combined. And the question is, what are we going to do about it? Under current law, fentanyl loses its Schedule I status by the end of the year. You oppose that, I assume.
I certainly do. Fentanyl, all fentanyl-related drugs should be scheduled
Do you
permanently.
support
under Schedule I.
mandatory minimums for people dealing in fentanyl?
I think we already have mandatory minimums for people.
Do you
dealing
think they should be increased?
I think we have more than enough ability now to attack this problem.
Well, would you agree with me? Whatever we have is not working.
Well,
Whatever we're doing is not working.
I agree with that because of the number of deaths that you pointed out.
So just keep an open mind that what we got on the books is not working. If somebody gave a pill to another person with arsenic or ricin, could they be charged with murder because that will kill you?
Absolutely.
Okay, if somebody gave a candy-shaped pill full of fentanyl, could they be charged with murder?
Well, they can be charged with drug trafficking leading to death. I don't think the statute says murder, but it does say specifically aims at that. We have brought prosecutions. I know, having discussed this with the U.S. Attorney in Colorado and the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York.
So Senator Cotton's got a proposal to dramatically increase the penalties associated with fentanyl. I'd like to work with you and the chairman, if we could, to find a bipartisan solution to this problem to create deterrence that doesn't exist. Mexican drug cartels, should they be designated foreign terrorist organizations under U.S. law?
Yeah, I think it's the same answer I gave before. They are already designated in any number of ways and sanctioned by the Treasury.
Would you oppose some of us trying to make them foreign terrorist organizations?
I wouldn't oppose it, but again, I want to point out there are diplomatic concerns. We need the assistance of Mexico in this and designating.
Is Mexico helping us effectively with our fentanyl
They
problem?
are helping us, but they could do much more. There's no question about that.
Well, if this is helping, I would hate to see what not helping looks like.
Well,
So the bottom line for me is they're not helping, and we need to up our game when it comes to fentanyl.
Fair enough, right? Fair enough. I'm not a huge fan of either one of those dudes. Just not. I agree with you. I'm seeing some of the comments here. Totally agree. Neither one of these guys. You know what I mean? But they're talking about it. So what this leads me to believe is, and the comments you guys are making about, hey, government's not there to help people. They're there to help government. 100% agreed on that. Yeah. But I think it's gotten so bad now that it's like you can't avoid it. And that's why the conversations are being had on levels like this in Senate hearings. Because a year or two ago, you wouldn't even hear fentanyl. You didn't know what it was. You had no idea. And what the thing that my experience over the last couple of weeks has been with my son passing is that folks don't understand really how this works. And it's essentially other drugs that you wouldn't associate with fentanyl are being laced with fentanyl because fentanyl is so strong and you only have to use just a tiny little bit of it to, get you the high that you need and basically amplify the high of whatever the drug was that, the base drug, whether it's a fake Percocet, a fake Oxy, heroin, whatever. It's just filler, and you can use a tiny amount of the filler. So it's like the perfect add-on, with the exception it kills people because it doesn't take very much, 2 milligrams, and somebody has an OD. So I think people are still under the impression of, as long as you stay away from the fentanyl, you're okay. But my experience has been, it's people who are doing other illegal street drugs that, even though maybe they've been decriminalized in their area, they're not going to go to jail. They're picking up street oxy, picking up street, whatever it is. Maybe it's Coke, and that's laced, and they don't know it, and game over. Game over. And that's the part where I'm having conversations with people who are stating, yeah, I'll be really careful. And I'm like, well, does that mean you're still probably going to do the same thing you've always been doing, but you're going to test, your batch out every time you get it? It's just taking people out left and right. I was watching a news article this morning, a news video this morning, and it was local, and a kid down south somewhere, South Washington, I can't, Tacoma maybe, and he had gone in and stolen just a whole bunch of stuff from a store, call it a Target or whatever, and it was really expensive, like cologne and perfume and that kind of thing, and he got a whole bunch of it out like in his clothes. And I'm probably butchering the facts, but it doesn't really matter. His statement was he was going to trade all this stuff, and it was like a dozen of, perfumes and cologne, whatever. He told police straight up he was going to trade it for fentanyl pills. And I'm kind of like, all right, yeah, that kid hasn't got the message, or his addiction is just so strong that that's the road he's going to keep going down. He is looking for the fentanyl pills. He's looking for them. Everybody else is, that kind of knows is like, yeah, I'm trying to stay away from that, because even though they're strong and they're very effective, it might not end up well. And I think right now is when people are realizing this might not end up well if I do this, or this, that isn't necessarily straight up fentanyl, but it could be laced. And that could be anything. It could be in weed, So it's kind of like we're at that point in time where people are looking around going, oh, this may not end up well for me. And it might not. Let's read the article. Attorney General Merrick Garland says Mexican drug cartels unleashed the fentanyl crisis on the U.S. on purpose and urged the Mexican government to do more to combat drug trafficking. I would find that more credible if we basically said this, China has a much larger part in this, but we don't want to go down that road because they're kind of our adversary, right? We can kind of say it, but let's place the blame on Mexico because it's coming up through our border there, our shared border there. And you know who was, it's ending up in weed in Oregon. What is up with, just leave the weed alone. You know what I mean? Why do we have to add stuff to other stuff? I mean, I know on the pills, that makes a lot of sense to a certain point. But other stuff, how about we add some fentanyl to wine? Just really, roll those dice. One of the things that's come to my mind is, who called all of this multiple years ago? Donald Trump. He really did. And everybody was like, you're racist. You don't like Mexico. You're saying that the Mexican border are just, allowing all those folks to come through. You're saying that they're drug dealers, and you say that they're sending drugs through the border with people, and that massive amounts of drugs are getting through. And you remember when everybody was like, yeah, he might be right, but that seems like a huge exaggeration. It wasn't. And so much of what that guy said, the way he said it just kind of came across as, oh, all right, if you just mellowed out just a smidge there, we'd be able to take this information you're giving us. But he was right. And he's been right on so many things, right? And you're just kind of like, you know who said that? You know who said that best? Yeah, Donald Trump. Garland made the statement while testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee on yesterday. Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican from South Carolina, pressed Garland regarding the opioid epidemic, highlighting that fentanyl is responsible for more deaths than guns and car accidents. All right, that statistic is for the age demographic of between 18 and 45. It's killing more people than guns and car accidents. 70,000 from fentanyl alone last year in the United States, and I think 107,000 total. It's a horrible epidemic, but it's an epidemic that's been unleashed on purpose by the Sinaloa new generation Jalisco cartels, Garland said. Graham then pressed Garland about what Mexico is doing to combat drug trafficking. They are helping us, but they could do much more. There's no question about that. And then Lindsey Graham goes on to, here's another headline. Seeing these pop up all the time now. Border Patrol seizes enough fentanyl to kill 100 million Americans in under 5 months. 100 million Americans. And last year, I think we seized enough fentanyl, enough drugs at the border laced with fentanyl that it would kill, vast majority of Americans. It has the ability to take them out. And that's just kind of how lethal this is. So it's not just my experience with what I've been through lately. This is kind of the story now because we don't have that whole pandemic thing to focus on. Have you noticed maybe your news feeds? You used to have that COVID section. That COVID section, and I didn't have a choice whether it was in there or not. It was like, we're gonna show you all the headlines about COVID. How about all the COVID origin stuff? You got the Department of Energy, you got the FBI. I just recorded the FBI one. Now I'm gonna run both of those on the platform that you're watching this on, the main platform. I'm gonna run both of those, even though running origins of COVID videos, a year ago would have either got you deplatformed or would have got you at least a strike, something like that. But now you've got enough mainstream on some of this stuff. And fentanyl is one of those mainstream stories that's going to get elevated because you can only hide, the broad numbers. And 107,000. So we had what, 1 million Americans die of COVID? All right. So just last year, we had 1/10 of that in fentanyl. And, vast majority of that comes right up through that southern border. So you can't fudge that. It's like, we know where they're coming. And for us here in the Pacific Northwest, they come right up the I-5. Just, it goes right through California, right through Oregon, right through here in Washington. And then in Washington, we get the impact. It's coming through Canada. It's coming through the Canadian border as well. So we're in kind of this, from both ends, double teamed, right? We're just like, So some crazy stuff going on. But right now you're starting to see a bunch of official recognition going on for this. And what are you going to do? You're going to tighten down the border? I mean, it's a day late, dollar short, especially for my son, right? He's no longer here. So I think that's why it's important for me to talk about it, because moving forward, what can we do? Well, recognizing it is one of the first things, but I think the recognition is coming because they're being forced to. You can't hide this any longer. And people are kind of going, all the overdose deaths we have in the homeless encampments and just in general. And it's impacting a lot of just, normal folks that aren't necessarily out there. Yeah. Spit roasted. Both ends. It's impacting people that normally wouldn't, this wouldn't be a thing, but because these drugs are so strong, fentanyl is so strong that they're producing, that it is a thing. The other drug that, the xylazine is another one that's really you're starting to see article after article after article on that. And the xylazine, the trank is what it's known as, or Cardi B or Steph Curry or whatever those nicknames were. I think Rage or Enraged or something. I don't know, but I've been following those stories for quite a while. And I've been talking about that here on News for Reasonable People for quite a while, is the whole trank / xylazine, which is a large animal, basically a horse tranquilizer. So we're in this position where you've got this stuff going on. And, I've been talking about the whole Philadelphia thing for a while. That is starting to become mainstream knowledge. And people are going, what in the F is going on? And these inner city environments like Philadelphia with its Kensington Avenue, like the Tenderloin in San Francisco, like the Skid Row in California, in LA, those areas are just going to be absolutely decimated by the fentanyl that's going through. And it already has. And Portland, another great example. I have contact with a few folks down there that are in law enforcement, retired law enforcement, that kind of thing. And the number of overdose calls that they're going on is amazing. I'm like, when do you have time to, go work on the car accidents and whatnot when you're dealing with all these overdose deaths? And not just an overdose, but so many of them, you get the Narcan into somebody and pop right back up. They're good to go. They feel terrible, because you've basically taken out all the feel good from the drugs they've ingested. Now they need to go get their next fix. ASAP pronto. And so, yeah, you've just got this situation that's just wild. Another indicator, like in Portland, I was just reading this, and the amount of available ambulances, because they're going out on this kind of call so often, oftentimes throughout the day, there are 0 ambulances available throughout the city of Portland. 0 ambulances. Like if you need one right now, well, you're going to have to wait until they get off that call, whatever it is. That's how much this stuff is going on. And it's been going on for a while, right? I mean, we've kind of known about this. My son knew about it. He continued to roll the dice, and he ended up on the wrong end of that gamble. You know, choices. We all make choices. And that's what this is all about. But can you place the blame on the Sinaloa cartel? Well, yeah, but it's not like they're coming here and dropping the drugs in people's mouths. But man, they are making it as available as possible. And the southern border being as open as it is, yeah, I have some issue with that. I have some major issue with that. I mean, that's just some real nonsense. You gotta have some kind of border going on. And what I was thinking of this morning again was, coke kills. Let's talk about that for 1 second. You know, the party drug of the 80s. I grew up in the 80s, and I wasn't quite old enough to really experience that. I'd always heard about, you know, the cocaine, but it wasn't until when I was much older, I was exposed to anybody that really did that kind of thing. I know a lot of you have shared with me your experiences of, had a big workload, you know, snort a couple of lines and whew, away you go. You know, it's just what you did. But back then, it wasn't laced with fentanyl. And so I am literally, before this live stream, I've probably had, I don't know, a couple of thousand emails, texts, and whatever. And I've tried to get to as many of those as I can. But some of the texts that I'm sending out is, hey, I know you do coke. I know you're a party boy. I know you're a party girl, whatever it may be. You need to really think about that, because you know, it's not every now and then you go, or how about, you know, kids go to a rave. If you ever been to a rave, you probably haven't, and that's okay too. It's awkward because all the girls are in thongs and pasties, and you're like, oh, okay, I got to focus on my feet, because otherwise I just look like an old, you know, creepy dude. But I'm typically there with, you know, one of my kids and like their girlfriend, but they all do, you know, these party drugs. Now those party drugs are laced with fentanyl, just like the cocaine, So anything now is fair game. And one of the addiction specialists I talked to yesterday, he said, and he helped my son Brennan a lot. And he said, hey, back in the day when he was, you know, doing his thing, if he was doing his thing the way he, you know, used to do it now, he'd be dead. And that's the thing, is that it could be in anything. So, you know, it's like, I always talk about real estate caveat emptor, which is buyer beware in residential real estate. I mean, you want to talk about buyer being aware. You touch any of this stuff is, you know, it could be game over. And that's what we're on the front end of. People think that it's just people taking fentanyl that are overdosing. No, it's people taking anything else. And that was what it was in the case of my son. It was probably a Xanax, a street Xanax, a fake Xanax bar. You know, one of those, it looks like a Tic Tac. I explain it as kind of a elongated, a little bit longer Tic Tac that you can break up into quarters sections so you can, you know, dose it out over time. But it was probably laced, and he lost his life. And that's unfortunately just kind of how this goes. And that's why we've got this, you know, wild epidemic that I think is really being elevated, because it probably needs to be. Fentanyl is primarily made in Mexico using ingredients shipped from China. It's primarily intercepted through ports of entry by Customs and Border Protection's Office of Field Operations as smugglers attempt to bring it across the U.S.-Mexico border, but it's also sometimes stopped by Border Patrol agents in the field. Seizures of fentanyl by the Border Patrol jumped from about 4,800 pounds in 2020 to 14,700 pounds, so basically tripled, right, last year. At least 12,500 pounds of fentanyl have already been seized in the first 4 months of fiscal year 2023, which began last October. So let's just talk about numbers. So are we going to have probably the same number of deaths this year? You're going to have 110,000 deaths. It feels like you're going to have more of that because it just kind of feels like there's more people being taken out. And I'm not sure if that's because, it happened to me personally, but having that happen to me personally as a dad, that means I got a lot of people reaching out, and just about everybody has a story of, all right, I lost 3 adult friends on it that weren't on that, but they were on this, and this, or this, drugs of choice. Lost that, or I lost my sister, I lost my kid, I lost, whatever. It's kind of feeling like everybody has somebody in their sphere or knows somebody close to them that's being taken down this way. And yet we've got this wide open border, and it's like, all right, yeah, maybe it's time that we cinch that down. Let's hear, speaking of that, let's hear from our esteemed leader of the free world. See if I can make this happen without absolutely butchering it. Okay, here we go. I'm not going to make you watch the whole thing because I know it's effing annoying, but here we go.
Fentanyl is killing more than 70,000 Americans a year.
Close the border. It's your fault.
So let's launch a major surge to stop fentanyl production and the sale and trafficking with more drug detection machines, inspection cargo, stop pills and powder at the border. Working with couriers like FedEx to inspect more packages for drugs. Strong penalties to crack down on fentanyl trafficking. Joining us tonight.
Sorry. Yeah. So his thing is, we need to intercept more at the border. How about you just close the border down? How about you go there? But we haven't. We've just basically had a wide open border. And why wouldn't they just send this stuff up willy-nilly? That's drug trafficking has risen hand in hand with illegal border crossings under President Biden's administration. And that's what I kind of wanted to point out here is, Biden tries to spin it as, let's do more investigation of packages. Well, and let's stop the production. Well, you're going to go into China? Are you going to have that talk? You're going to have the sit down talk with China and say, hey, we know you're producing these chemicals. We know you're shipping them to Mexico. Could you stop doing that? No mention of China at all, right? Because politically, that gets a little rough, right? And, you hear the Attorney General start talking about, well, we don't really want to drop the hammer on Mexico because we need their help. So he's basically saying, well, we can't absolutely piss them off because, they're responsible for their side of the border, and that's just going so poorly. I mean, just couldn't be going any worse, right? I mean, I think the most recent stat was on average, 230,000 illegal immigrants through the southern border a month, 250,000 a month. And there's been how many million that have already gone through? It's just mind blowing, right? I mean, Trump was right. Hate to see it. I don't hate to say that, but it seems like there's so many people who just scream out whatever Donald Trump says. And when Trump was saying that a few years ago, I was like, well, it could be true, but it seems like a little bit of a stretch. Doesn't seem like a stretch at all now, does it? No, it doesn't seem like a stretch at all now. Same thing with the origins of COVID. doesn't seem like a stretch that it was done in a lab. It got released from a lab in China. Yeah. Remember Chinese flu? China flu? Is that what he called it? China flu? Somebody let me know in the comments. That guy had some, I miss that guy. I really do. I miss that guy. The U.S. saw roughly 100,000 monthly border encounters in February 2021 when Biden took office. But now, yeah, here we go. But now regularly sees well over 230 encounters, according to Border Patrol data. So 250,000 a month. I mean, can you, it's not a stretch. It's not a stretch with how much fentanyl's coming through, right? It's just not. That's not, I mean, that's not a, especially with the way the cartel works, right? Send a bunch of people through. They've got drugs on them. They get drugs here. And then they tell them, hey, you owe us a bunch more money, and you make them work here and, you know, carrying drugs around. So we don't even know who the people are that are in this country, right? We have like no idea. We have no tracking of these folks. They're just here doing their thing. And it's not shocking that we are where we are. It's total dereliction of duties at the border, right? Who was it that impeached the, not Homeland Security? Maybe it was Homeland Security guy. I forget who that is. My mind is still a little, it's just not firing on 100%. But that's why I'm doing this live stream, is that I need to get back in the saddle. I need to get going. And I wanted to kind of do this live stream and just talk about some of this stuff while it's fresh in my mind. And I'm not going to dwell on this. This isn't, I've had people tell me, hey, Sean, you need to get really angry against the cartel. I'm like, all right. And that does exactly what for me? You know, rots out my insides. That's not where I'm at. Am I upset? Yeah. Do I think it's unfair? Yeah. Am I going to blame somebody specifically? No, probably not. I've got the information on the guy that sold my kid his last batch. Am I going to do anything with that? I might turn it over to the police, but what is that really going to do? You know what I mean? And some people say, wow, it just might help one person. Yeah, okay. And that's why I've done the video work that I have. That's why I recorded the video I did, because that's kind of that's my thing. And doing this live stream, you know, just talking about stuff that's going on out there that I think a lot of people don't have the personal perspective from. So now you've got, I'm not going to call these two guys, you know, Lindsey Graham and Merrick Garland posers, but you know what I mean? Doesn't that seem like a adequate word? Each of them have done some good things. Lindsey Graham, I mean, there's pros and cons on both of them, right? The Attorney General, not a fan. Got to say that. Lindsey Graham, not a fan. But you guys are making some funny comments. You get me distracted, which is not hard to do. It's not hard to do right now. What did I do this morning? I was supposed to get somebody a password for one of my accounts, and then I ended up just looking at some videos of something totally unrelated. 20 minutes goes by, and I kind of, oh, hey, and somebody's asking me, you know, for the information, and I'm like, it's Thursday. Hey, here we go. I'm going to do a live stream. And so, you know, these are things that I need to get back on and going on. But if I can talk about it and talk about my personal experience, another thing that I have considered doing is I have some footage of what happened with me going over and dealing with my son, dealing with the police, dealing with my son's dead body in his apartment, cleaning that out. I've got some footage on that. I got a lot of footage, and it's rough footage. Like, you're going to have to blur out a bunch of stuff, but I've been kind of considering doing that because this is enough of an epidemic. There are enough people dying now. It's impacting enough social circles in general where everybody kind of knows somebody, and putting together a real tearjerker. Like if you wanted to sit your 14-year-old kid down and have a video of what happens to you if you die from an overdose, maybe fentanyl related, maybe not, it would be one of those videos. I mean, it would be on the cutting edge of whether YouTube would allow it. Maybe I put it on Rumble, but I took that footage knowing that I was experiencing, 107,000 other families experienced, something along those lines last year. 107,000. And is it going to be a couple 100,000 this year? Probably, more than likely. And COVID took out 1 million. And look, we shut the economy down for that. We can't even shut the border down for, or at least pretend that we've got a border, even though we're told, border secure, it's all closed. It's like, it's closed. Yet 230,000 people a month were, encountering 250,000 people a month. Can you imagine? You know what I mean? It's like, I call it the kingdom, but whatever it is, Safeco Field, whatever, corporate entity now has the name to what should be the kingdom here in Seattle, holds 65,000. So quadruple that, dump all those people out, and they're going through the border or going up to the border every single month. And so now we're going to try and, reel this back in. Good luck with that. Cat's out of the bag. That's not going to happen. And so the flip side is, oh, good Lord, governmental entities are sitting around looking at each other going, this has taken out a lot of people. Oof. We can't avoid these stats, even though we're going to try and hold them down a little bit. So if you guys hear theories of that, I would love to know. If you hear of things that you're like, it doesn't sound quite right. Those are some of the things I'm experiencing, but I'm also just hypersensitive because I lost a kid. You know what I mean? I'm just jumping at everything going, that's not good. Can't have that. And that too will pass. Some of the things that I always rely on are this too shall pass, and it will. And so, again, like me doing this live stream, it's like, I gotta, knock that rust off and keep it going. Let's finish the article, because why not? The drug poses a massive threat to users because it is roughly 50 times more potent than heroin, but users are often not aware it's been mixed in with the drugs they purchase. I've had this talk with so many of my friends that when I grew up in the 70s and 80s, maybe you had heard of that one dude who did heroin, and they were like way out there in the drug culture, right? Maybe a bunch of you that might be a little bit older heard of more. But I, growing up in the 70s and 80s, I didn't experience that because I was a kid, but you knew it was out there, and you knew that you might overdose from heroin. You might shoot just a little too much and it takes you out. Now, that is child's play. They're going to be able to get you back from heroin. They're going to bring you back. I mean, remember when in Pulp Fiction, and I've talked about this a bunch, in Pulp Fiction, where Eric Stoltz gives the adrenaline needle. Was it? I think it was Eric Stoltz, or was it John Travolta? I can't remember. To Uma Thurman, and she just goes from being lying flat on her back to, you can do that. You can do that with the whole heroin thing, and you can do that with fentanyl. But if you can't get to the person or they have a heart attack, guess what? Game over. And so, going back to that whole 70s and 80s and even into the 90s thing, you knew about heroin. You knew heroin. Not a ton of people were dying from it. Let's be honest. They just weren't. Statistically, it was very, very small percentage. And people did coke like there was, it was going out of style, right? I mean, I've watched all the Studio 54 movies. I find that whole period really fascinating. Back then there wasn't fentanyl. And so wildly different game plan. And unfortunately, what I think is going to happen is it's going to take out a wide swath of my son's generation. And he might be a little bit on the older end of things. He hasn't, he'd had, call it 10 years of experimenting and addiction on and off. He got clean in 2019, put him through treatment multiple times. He went through detox 2 or 3 times. And detox is one of those things for these guys that are stuck on fentanyl. It's really tough to get off. Like it is like going through living death. And that's why they don't want to get off it. And I get that. But with drugs in a setting, and by drugs, I mean drugs that a doctor gives you to reverse some of the withdrawal effects, it can be done. You can get into treatment and you can, make it an experience where it's doable, but doing it on your own. And interestingly enough, I think the third time my kid got off, he did it on his own because I had said, you're not coming back here. Mom's not taking you. We can't deal with you. You're making decisions on your own. It was some real tough love stuff. Like, dig down and go, well, my kid might die. And so, I've had, call it 4 years of having to consider my kid might die. And then when he does, and I'm not trying to be flippant about it, but I'm just sharing, hey, this is the reality, is when you've gone down that road so many times, you've literally walked down the hall wondering if your kid might have suffered from an overdose because what he's taking could be laced. That tends to put a different spin on things. But I think what it's going to do is it's going to take out the fentanyl that's coming around now. It's going to take out the younger generation, those kids who are 14, 15, 16, early teenagers. Because the older kids, they're going to have just even 18, 19, 20-year-olds, they're going to have a slightly different perspective because they've probably been doing it for a while. But the younger kids, they don't know that one Xanax that they take, that they just want to chill out with, is laced. And that puts them down, and their friends won't know what to do. Their friends won't know what Narcan is. And so that's why I'm, covering this as much as I have initially and trying to get some of the word out. And this live stream here will be one of those pieces. It's like you've got governmental entities. You've got the president. You've got the attorney general. You've got Lindsey Graham. Kind of openly talking about what used to be just, well, that's for the addicts. That's for the addicts. And it is, but it's going to take out a much wider swath of that. And from that standpoint, I think you're going to see a big spotlight put on this. And moving forward, I don't know how it'll go down, because what are you going to do to stop all those drugs coming up through the southern border? How are you going to, build the wall? Are you going to go down those roads? Well, we know the current administration is not going to do that, right? I mean, they talk a big talk, but they do nothing. Nothing is done. It's just not, right? I mean, it's like you hear what they say, the border is mostly secure. You're like, okay, but this many people came through it, and we got this many illegal people in the United States that are just roaming around, taking advantage of, just crazy, crazy stuff. So I don't think there's a great solution. And it's kind of come to this point. We're at this point in time with this situation where politicians are going, oh my gosh, this is going to be a train wreck. This is going to be even worse than what we thought. And so it's interesting from my standpoint to hear Biden talk about, let's support FedEx because they really check out their packages. Okay, but and then trying to stop these drugs come through the southern border. With the situation you've got, you can probably ratchet it down, but the number of pills we're talking about to kill enough of enough Americans at least once over, that's seized at the border. How many pills got through? How many millions and millions of fentanyl-laced drugs got through? A lot. Probably, way more than we can imagine. And that's why I think politicians and leaders throughout are going, oh, this isn't just fentanyl now. This is any drug that's out there, the street drug, anything, even weed on the black market. It's interesting. You say legalize it, and we have legalized weed. You can go to a weed store right here by my office, buy all the weed you want. But there's still an extremely active black market, right? Because the weed at these stores is taxed at 39%, something just crazy like that. The state's got to get their due, right? So that they can go fund, $11.5 billion worth of housing for the homeless to have drug addicts on illegal drugs living in. Rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. Crazy situation, right? So we legalize. Do we legalize these street drugs? People can just walk into a store and buy them. We're so far off of doing that. We're so far off of doing that. And then are you just basically, it's like booze. You take enough of it, it's going to kill you. But the thing with, and I was talking with one of my cousins yesterday, and he was like, benzos, it's going to take a bunch of benzos to put you down, like Xanax or, Oxy or whatever. It's going to take, and even some of the opioid based stuff, it's going to take a bunch of those to put you down, like kill you. But it doesn't take much fentanyl. I mean, 2 milligrams, just a smidge, just a hair, just one line of Coke, right? And people are done. They're just game over, done. And that has been a disconnect that is now being pieced together, and people are realizing it's in everything. It's in everything. And people are going, oh, but so when I go to the rave, I always take, a little ecstasy, a little E or a little Molly, whatever you want to call it. What are we going to do? We can't go to raves sober. You know what I mean? And like I've talked about Rolling Stones, Mother's Little Helper, go running for the shelter of Mother's Little Helper. That's a great song, by the way, but it's literally Mother's Little Helper that killed my son. We think. I mean, it just, anything else doesn't make sense. So it was Xanax, an anti-anxiety drug, and a street drug at that, trying to mimic it, Xanax, because we don't even know what's in this stuff, right? I mean, when it gets made in China, they don't exactly have a list of ingredients and, all right, it's met these, medical standards, and we shipped it off to Mexico and they put it all together, and we're sure they're doing just a stellar job. Oh, it's the mix up on that things are going sideways. So yeah, we've got this. You got the super meth coming out, the P2P. They've kind of re-engineered it the way that they used to, and it's way stronger. We just talked about fentanyl being 50 times stronger than heroin or opioids, 50 times. That's why it's taking people out. It's just shutting their heart down. They just, and if nobody's around them, I don't, if somebody had been around my son, would he still be alive? I don't know. And I can play that second guessing game all day long. It doesn't help me. My son's dead, and again, I'm not being flippant. It's super cut and dried for me. It's like, all right, we've got this in reality. Here's how we move forward. And so that's just kind of how it goes. But I think it'll be really interesting moving forward to see what the general reaction is. What are we going to do to combat this? Because I don't think there are a lot of tools out there. So you're going to see just a whole bunch of kids and a whole bunch of adults as well that are, going to get taken out, because that's literally what's going on. And we're recognizing that and going, oh, yeah, let's inspect some more packages at the border. Let's support FedEx. And you're like, okay, how's that working out? It's kind of like Lindsey Graham saying to the Attorney General, if Mexico is helping right now, I'd hate to see what they're doing if they weren't helping. You know what I mean? We've got this epidemic on our hands, and it's like, well, if this is an example of what they're doing, what if they didn't do anything at all? Worse. Could it get much worse? It doesn't feel like it, does it? No, it doesn't feel like it. And the rest of the world is probably just looking at the United States and going, that's what you get. You guys have been a big bully. You guys have just run around fighting all these wars, and you've just kind of done what you want. Go F yourselves. That's what I think the rest of the world, except those of our closest allies who, we support and we give money, and then we give billions of dollars to Ukraine over there, fighting a war over there. And we can't seem to work out what's going on in East Palestine in Ohio. That's still going on. The crews that are cleaning that bad boy up, they're getting sick, but it's okay. Drink the water. So all this stuff, and I know you guys are reasonable, but man, there's some conspiracy stuff going on, right? I mean, like, this is all planned. Is this all planned? If it is, Scary plan. Could be. It could be. I'm not saying it's not. I'm not one to promote it, to promote ideas that I don't have, hard data for. I'm kind of more of a data guy. I was thinking about this in the terms of sales price, which is a historical term in real estate, versus pending sales price versus active listing price. Active listing is what we know the home won't sell for, right? Because if it was, it would sell. It wouldn't be on the market. That's kind of an oversimplification, but it's true. Pending sales price, that's probably pretty close to what it's going to be when it closes, but you might negotiate a little bit right before closing, and so that price changes. Sales price, historical fact, that is just boom, what it is. It's a fact that gets entered into the county records, and it's like, that is your empirical data. Now, we are having so much in the way of numbers come out on the empirical data on this, fentanyl crisis and the numbers coming through the southern border, that it's no longer Donald Trump saying, they're allowing all these drugs coming through. They're allowing all these rapists to come up and just, acclimate into the United States. We're just open border. That's what we're doing. It's no longer that. It's 107,000 people died. 70,000 went out from fentanyl. And what's it going to be this year? And so from that standpoint, I think there is a real focus on what you've got going on here. But there's a lot of focus on a lot of other stuff too, right? This isn't just the one thing, but this is one thing that's going to take out a lot of people. And I always put it in the context of, look at how much reaction we had to COVID. I mean, it was insane. We shut the entire state of Washington down over 15,000 deaths. Not trying to take away from anybody who lost a loved one to COVID, but the overreaction to COVID was something else, right? I mean, that seemed like a massive overreaction. And now you're going to have a reaction to this particular issue. And it'll be really interesting to see what that looks like, because you're not going to be able to cap this one. You're not going to be able to just go that route, because this is something that's, you got the Mexican cartel, you've got China involved. I mean, you've got some far-reaching impact that the United States hasn't put a lot of emphasis on. And now all of a sudden, good Lord, we need to check out more packages like FedEx is doing, right? I mean, it's like, okay, you are literally years late and days short. So can't really help you there, but it's another train wreck that we're watching. And yeah, how about Como killed the elderly during COVID? What about that? Yeah. What about that? How about heroin deaths coincided with the Afghanistan poppy fields? Yeah, we're not really into the whole heroin thing anymore, are we? We've got so many of these synthetic drugs, and we've just moved past heroin, right? I know it's still a thing, and I know still people do it, but when's the last time you heard of like a heroin overdose? I don't know that I've heard of any. It's all been fentanyl. Yeah, crazy stuff. All right. I think that's going to do it for me on this one. Yeah, we went just about an hour. That's pretty good. I feel good about that. All right, I'm going to see what you guys are talking about here. Yeah. You know what? You guys have been talking. I'm going to let you guys do stuff on your end, but yeah. Every now and then I'll see a comment and it's just like, oh, this is my reality. It sucks, but that's why I'm here, to move my reality forward. And thank you guys for being here and helping me move my reality forward, because I just got to get in some reps and keep doing this and, get back on the saddle and go. So thank you. This probably wasn't a stellar live stream, but you know what it was? It was me doing a live stream, and this is kind of where I needed to be at. All right, I'm going to go before I have a breakdown. You guys take care. We'll catch up soon. Bye for now.